Welcome to the Pucks with Haggs podcast, a proud member of the CLNS Media Network. Make sure to hit subscribe to the Bruins Ringside YouTube channel and turn on notifications for when a new video drops on the channel. This show is brought to you by Prize Picks. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this season on Prize Picks, where it's good to be right. The show is also brought to you by Game Time, the best ticket app to take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets, hockey tickets, comedy tickets, concert tickets, whatever you have. Go to Game Time to get those tickets. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download the Game Time app today. All right, everybody, welcome in. This is the 229th episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. I'm your host, Joe Haggerty. You can find my work at joehaggerty.substack.com. And also, I write columns for the Boston Sports Journal, so check out bostonsportsjournal.com. Become a subscriber there. You can read all the stuff from everybody, myself, Greg Bedard, Mike Giardi, all kinds of talented writers. I also do a weekly Q&A there. With me this week, I have a couple of awesome guests. I have longtime friend and colleague Mick Colageo. Mick, please tell everybody where they can find your work.
My blog, Rink Wrap, is linked to X and Facebook, and I have the Bruins preview in the Hockey News Yearbook.
And with us today, needs no introduction, last but certainly not least, Andy Brickley, entering his 24th year of color commentary with NESN on the broadcast, 28th year overall broadcasting, and of course, that's after a stellar NHL career for Brick. NESN will air and live stream 67 broadcasts, including an hour of pregame and postgame every game, whether they have the broadcast or not. That'll start with Thursday's home opener against the Chicago Blackhawks. He is joining us live from his home offices in Hingham. Brick, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. You know, we're finally at that point where NHL games matter, and that always gets me a little bit more excited than watching training camp.
No question. Charlie Jacobs mentioned it's like Christmas morning, like when the regular season gets going the other day. And I think it's totally true for people that are dyed-in-the-wool hockey people, for the people that love the sport. There is nothing like that jolt of caffeine when the regular season starts after the regular season is over. But Brick, let's look back a little bit at the preseason and sort of the last week or so. And the decisions that were made with the roster going into this year. Some interesting choices. I think they made sense. Jeffrey Viel ends up making the team, adds a little bit more sandpaper and toughness and just kind of a great pro. Johnny Beecher ends up making the team, and I think that's a nod maybe to his penalty killing and face-off abilities. Guys like Alex Steves, Matt Patra, Blumel, more of the skilled scorers type. They end up down in Providence. What did you make of the final roster and the people that stayed versus the people that went down to Providence?
Well, I'll start with Viel. I think not only do I agree with your assessment of the player, I love the fact that it sends a clear message to the rest of the group, that especially the players that thought they had a chance to be on this opening night roster that got sent to Providence, that this is how you do it. This is the way you come into camp. This is how you earn a job. And I always pull for the guys that have been career minor leaguers. It makes me think of Sean Thornton and how many games Thornton played in the various American League. I don't know if he played in the IHL or not, but the time he put in and the sacrifice he made, the commitment to the job and the career, and then it pays off for him later on in his NHL career. So that's a great message to send to the rest of the organization for the players that were disappointed in being sent to Providence. John Beecher. Yeah, maybe there's some other variables in there too, contract waivers, whatever it might be. But you're right. He is good in the face-off circle. He is a pretty good penalty killer. He has that great speed. He has good size. He's really hard to coach, though. You know, if you ask anybody that coaches him, you just see so much potential in this guy. That's why he went late in the first round, was that potential. How do you corral it, and how do you get the most out of it? When he plays his game, he can be an effective guy. He can impact the game. He can help you win games during the regular season. So not surprised to see him on the bubble, but on the roster. Matt Patra didn't do enough in terms of production and creativity, from my eyes, in training camp to say he needs to be here. Now, he could go down to Providence, be better than a point-a-game player down there, find his game, and his game needs more separation, Haggs and Mick. You know, when I say offensive players, you know, there are times where you invite the body contact, you spin off that hit, you still have control of the puck. Now you have an outnumbered situation, a 2-on-1, a 3-on-2, and then you use your foot speed to attack the net. I don't get enough of that from him. He's supposed to be an offensive player, and if he's going to play inside the top 9, he didn't do enough. he didn't outplay a guy like Fraser Minton if that was his competition for the third line center position. When the Bruins went out and acquired veteran NHL players to play on lines 3 and 4, you knew that battle for 3C, if you want to call it that, was going to come down probably to those two kids. And Minton was the better player in camp, and he seems like he's got a better sense of how to play the game in all three zones than Potter does right now. So I'm not surprised by their decisions when you talk about those three players in particular. And as far as the guys that came in with impressive numbers from the American Hockey League over the last 2 years, Blue Mal and Steves, they were pretty good in camp. But again, you got to come in and win a job. You got to come in and displace an NHL veteran guy, and they didn't do enough. Now, they may get opportunities, 13 games in 22 days. You never know how it's going to go. I hope we have an idea what this team's going to be like at the end of October. Usually we talk about American Thanksgiving, but it might be the end of October when we have an idea what this team's going to be. So those guys that went to Providence, they got to go down with the right attitude. I've certainly been in that position before where I've come in, thought I had a good camp, thought I had a chance to be, a regular inside the top 12 forward position, and I end up on a bus, to the minor leagues. And you have to go down there with the right attitude. Your leadership in Providence has to make sure that you have the right attitude if you have a chance to come back up. And when you come back up, you don't want to ever go back down. So that has to be the attitude of those guys. So long-winded way of saying I agreed with all the decisions based on performance in training camp.
Yep, and ultimately that's what it should come down to, and that helps you organizationally. It helps you motivate your players that are down in Providence. It helps the NHL guys know that people are breathing down their necks and there's quality depth down there if there's slippage in their game, and it keeps everybody ultimately. I feel like the players respect if the best guy in camp ends up getting the job, and it's based on merit. That's always the best way to do any of that stuff.
Yeah, and the challenge, Haggs, for the coaching staff, especially with a new coach, was, how do we team build yet encourage intense competition for jobs in training camp? That's always a fine line to walk, and sometimes the team aspect will lag behind a little bit if there's tremendous competition.
Absolutely. And I agree with you too. When it comes to Patra, he would be, I don't want to say an all-world player, but he would be an extremely good NHL player if he was a little more explosive with the foot speed, getting separation when he has the puck and when he thinks the game. If feet could move as well as his mind moves when he has the puck and seeing plays develop and all the other stuff, he would be at a whole different level. And he's still young enough, I think, to be able to gain some of that as far as the explosiveness and the skating speed goes, or at least get a little bit more that he's going to need. But I think that's bang on with all that. I really did not have an issue with any of that stuff. I was super happy for Jeffrey Viel making the team. He said it was only the second time that he's made an NHL roster in his entire pro career, and the only other time was in San Jose, and he broke his finger in a fight the last preseason game of the year and didn't actually get to be on the team. He was on the injured list to start the year when he made the team before. So it's got to be pretty sweet for him to actually make it, be healthy, probably get in the lineup, like you said, because it's a busy October, and show what he can do. And he has, like Thornton, he has a little bit of an offensive wrinkle to his game. He's not just like a tough guy that'll go out there and fight people and play hard and physical. Every once in a while, he's going to be able to make a play to open up your eyes a little bit. Mick, your thoughts on the roster and what you saw in the players that were ultimately chosen?
Viel asserted himself offensively in a situation where a game was on the line, and really kind of sent notice that he's a hockey player. And I thought that was a terrific for the Bruins to recognize that. And I think that it also speaks loudly to how the Bruins intend to, along with bringing in Tanner Jeannot and Mikey Isamont to and try to take some fights off of Kastelik's card, bringing Viel in here. I love that, because if you saw these two preseason games between the Panthers and the Lightning, then you know that the division could get very Chuck Norris division-like. It could at times. And so you want to be ready for it. You want to be that kind of team. You don't have Frederick anymore. And so I think that Marco Sturm really said it right. You need to show me something. You need to change my mind. You need to convince me somehow. I love the way Alex Steves plays the game. And I had a really great chat with him about it. And he was, before these breakaways blew up in his face, in the same game. He had admitted that not enough has happened for me with my opportunities. Not enough has happened. He fully expected to get cut. He didn't say those words, I'm going to get cut, but he said, I'm happy with how I've worked, with what I've tried to do. I'm not happy with the results. I don't feel like I've done enough. And this guy, I think, will do a better job adjusting to the demotion, the assignment to Providence, than perhaps Blumel, because I think Blumel, he tried to fire every puck at the net every chance he was on the ice. I thought his last 2 games he played with more structure, but his game under a more controlled was not very compelling. It was just rather average looking. I really like Steve's game. I thought he has a chance to be a Nola Chari type of player on this team, and maybe some of that ability to score around the net could help the Bruins. We'll see what happens as training camp lends its reality over the next month, and we see how Providence plays and what goes on from there. The whole Poitras thing, yeah, it was Poitras played a couple of games in a row that really made me think that, hey, I really hope he makes this team. I feel like he's starting to show something here. I totally get what Andy's saying here about invite the contact, create a situation where you have an advantage, and then use your foot speed to maximize that. There's not enough there for Poitras. He's probably going to be a much better skater in 5 years than he is right now. Adam Oates was a much better skater at 35 than he was at 25. And so it's a long career for Poitras, and you hope you won't get discouraged here, because the kid definitely has instincts, ability, and knows how to read situations. And so getting the body to catch up to the mind for him will be a major part for him. Minton, I think he was always going to be on this team. I'm like totally mesmerized watching this guy. It looks to me like I'm watching Bergeron in a mirror. I just feel like the left-hand shot, the reads, the forecheck, the paths he takes, how he plays around the contact areas, how he conducts himself when there's a puck battle on the boards, where he's in the middle of it or on the fringes of it. There's just so much smarts in this kid's game, and he's only 21 years old, and he's already got the body to play against men. I'm excited, and I don't expect numbers necessarily, but I love the fact that the Bruins have a centerman who can play the wing if they need it, but he can play third line center right now and be a winning player at that age. That's incredible. And I feel like, as much as I like Brandon Carlo, that's a steal right now.
Yeah, I loved to see that feed from Minton to a crashing Zadorov in that last preseason game, and see that offensive awareness and that ability to set up his teammates, and just the hockey smarts offensively, in addition to the penalty killing, the face-offs, the being the third man high and making sure his line mates are taken care of, playing the 200-foot game, doing all the smart things away from the puck that he seems to do at such a young age. I'm definitely not going Bergeron yet, Mick. I want to see a lot more of him before I start going there. And I know you've mentioned that with him before, but I definitely see a lot of Charlie Coyle-like qualities with him, as far as like everything that he can bring to the table as a third line center. And in addition to chipping in some things offensively. Brick, maybe a little more on Fraser Minton, your thoughts on him, how well you think he can do in this rookie year, and how much does it benefit him too, to have Mikey Eyssimont and Tanner Jeannot on either side of him, maybe create a little more space for him, certainly protect him a little bit more. And we did see that in the preseason too, when guys were trying to take liberties with him. You saw Eyssimont get involved, you saw Jeannot get involved. I think that's going to help a young player tremendously.
Yeah, as much as I'm around these guys and travel with them, on the plane and the hotels, on all the road trips, the lengthy road trips, you get to know the players to a certain degree, but I don't get too close to the players. I think that would hinder the job that I have to do. If you get too, cozy with guys, you become a little less objective. So I base some of my analysis on a player with his interviews. And that's where I'll start with Fraser Minton. And the intelligence and the awareness and the maturity just, they bowl you over for a kid that has not been around in the NHL for a long time.
Yep.
So I think that puts him in good stead, certainly with me, from my perspective and the way I evaluate, that the kid has gray matter. And then you watch him play, and I agree with everything that Mick said. The way he processes the game, he has economy of motion, and he's going to make this team as a responsible, trustworthy third-line center that can play in most situations in all three zones. And then I will try to add some offense as I get more and more reps and play with NHL players and learn how to be more effective as an offensive player and be a sponge. Learn from the offensive guys. Hang around with them. Learn from the veterans and be open-minded and use your practice time accordingly. And I think he has all that, but I think it starts with his head, number one, and I think that sets him apart from most younger players.
Absolutely.
And if I could add one other thing, going back to Patra.
Yeah.
There are two things that can hurt players of his generation. One was COVID, and the other is getting hurt. You know, when you're in that area of growth as a player and understanding what it takes to be an NHL player, and then everything is put on hold, either due to injury or COVID, that stunts your growth. It stunts your development. And that goes across the league for all players that were in that window of being drafted or developed or acquired or whatever it was. And I think that has not helped him get to where we want him to be and expect him to be and hope that he will be. And we hope it happens this year for him.
Yeah, no doubt.
Remember when David Krejci got clocked by Adam Mayer in that visit during the 06-07 Louis year? And his career as an NHLer really started the next season.
Right.
Krejci could have been of different fiber and responded differently to that event. Instead, he wound up having a fantastic career.
Yep.
No, it's a great point. And I do think it was absolutely the right call last year to put Patra in Providence the second half of the year and let him develop, let him play a lot of minutes, let him get that time that he didn't get because of injuries, because of COVID, everything else, and let him try to like get back what maybe he missed a little bit. Because I think that's an excellent point, Brick, that you're making about him being part of that generation that did kind of get screwed a little bit just based on circumstances, and then the injury didn't help either. But like you can see the way he processes the game, the way he sees the game, he just naturally, almost every shift, he's setting his teammates up for scoring chances. And, you know, he's not ever going to be a big-time goal scorer himself, I don't think. You know, maybe, you know, he could get to like 20 goals or whatever. But Krejci was never like that either. But you do see the Krejci-like ability in him to see plays develop for his teammates, to set them up. And like, to me, part of like what the problem was in Providence or in training camp was he was setting teammates up that weren't finishing off the plays, and it comes down to production for him. And if those plays aren't getting finished and the goals aren't coming, you're going to go down to Providence until they can turn into goals. And you know, Steve's played into that a little bit as well, because in that last preseason game that he played in, I counted like 4 grade A chances he could have had based on how plays were developing, and a couple he didn't get shots on net, you know, and a couple he did, but he didn't score on any of them. And those need to get in the back of the net if you're going to be a top 6 forward in the NHL for sure. All right, big picture, Brick. Will this Bruins team be a playoff team in your mind? And I know what you mentioned about October, and I agree with you. Like, we're not going to get a read on this coaching staff, this combination of players, like everything involved. Jeremy Swayman bouncing back, the defense being the strength of the team, everything else, how the systems, how the players have incorporated that into actual results on the ice, if they're going to have enough offense, like all these, how the power play is going to be under Steve's spot and him, which I'm going to tell you right now, and I think Don Sweeney maybe mentioned this the other day, super impressed watching Steve Spot at practice and the way he runs the power play drills and the way he really commands things out there. Like, that guy looks like a guy that's doing exactly what he is supposed to be doing, is in full command of what he's doing and knows exactly what he wants out there. And I think that all that stuff bodes well for the power play. But in your mind, in your gut, do you think this is going to be a playoff team at the end of the day?
I think a lot of things have to fall into place. You know, all those unknowns that we are talking about, they need to hit on the majority of them. They need to hit on 80% of them. You know, you got to have a redemption year in goal from Jeremy Swayman. I need Charlie McAvoy to take that torch that he's been handed as the next great defenseman on the back end for the Bruins. You know, great kid, really good player, really talented, but he's got to learn how to control a game and take over a game when necessary, when needed. That's what the great ones do back there. You know, he can handle the minutes. He can play physical. We know all of what his talents are. Now he has to have that maturity as a star defenseman in this league because the Bruins need it. You know, can Lindholm, Elias, and Zadorov play to their free agency contracts? You know, Zadorov had a pretty good year last year, but he's got another level. And it starts with being disciplined and making the right reads and playing a smart, disciplined game, and then let his skills and his size be an effective player and impact the game. Lindholm, he doesn't have to be an 85-point guy for me. You know, he just needs to be a really good, for this team, 1C. They don't have a stud in the middle of the ice, and that's one of my concerns: the strength down the middle. But they can get it done through system play and everybody maximizing what they bring to the lineup in the middle of the ice. This is, you already brought up the power play. The penalty killing's just as much a concern for me as the power play for the Bruins.
Yep.
But because they're wondering where the goals are going to come from, the power play gets greater emphasis, and I understand that. And that too plays into McAvoy. If he's going to be at the top of the umbrella, he's got to add a better dynamic to that power play at the top of the umbrella. I think they can make more plays closer to the net. I think they can use the bumper more. And you're right, Spot was brought in totally for this. And people that I talked to around the league that had worked with him and saw him and were in his environment that I wasn't. They all told me, very, very positive things about this guy and that he would be a good acquisition and would certainly help. And then when I started thinking about the players they acquired in the offseason in order to try to get back the culture that had suffered a hit last year with the players that had moved on and players that had retired, and that they're trying to reestablish what that locker room should be all about and the accountability. And they use that phrase, we want to be a tough out. And I get all of that. And you need leaders in your, I hate the phrase bottom six, third and fourth lines, I'll call it.
Yep.
I don't like that word bottom when you associate that because they're so important,
100%.
But they need leaders, and I don't want to go back to 2011, but you think about that third and fourth lines that those Bruins teams had. They had leaders down there. They had Chris Kelly. They had Sean Thorne. You need that. That's why VL, I think, because of his experience and his journey, could be a leader in that group. You want Juneau to be one of those leaders. You want Eisenman. You certainly want Corrali to be the guy that you expect him to be. That's all great news as far as depth. But you can't just be a tough out. You can't just be a tough team to play against. You got to get results. That's the word you used, Haggs. You got to win hockey games, Yep. And that's what it's all about. So then it comes down to team play. You got a rookie coach, will there be the buy-in? I think the best buy-in example I think I would use is, are they using their speed on the back check? And I saw some of that in training camp, If the team has the puck and they're facing up, they'll drop into their 1-2-2. But if they don't, and it's a transition play, is there the pace on the back check? Are they committed on the back check to get back and then take away middle ice? That last game 6 of the preseason, I saw a lot of that, particularly in the first half of the hockey game. That's the way they're going to have to play. They're going to have to play like that, play consistently, but you need to get results for the buy-in to sustain. And that's what I'm waiting to watch.
Yep. And that's how it's going to play out when the going gets tough, especially when the schedule gets heavy and the legs get heavy. If they're playing so many games in so few days in October, we're going to see a test really quickly as to whether that buy-in and that back check is there consistently every single night. And maybe hanging on to the 2 extra forwards helps in that regard too, to get other guys out there that'll be fresh and can go out there and give you that back check. And Jeffrey Viel, I'm sure, is going to back check like a madman with his hair on fire every time he's out there on the ice. There's going to be no doubt about that. Mick, your thoughts just on the big picture view now, having seen training camp. And I agree with Brick, the buy-in needs to be there, but I started to get the feeling as training camp was going on that the buy-in was there, and there were good vibes in training camp as the way they were playing and adhering to the systems and playing a little bit differently. And some of that, that trap that we saw that we didn't really see before, Brick, that we saw in games when in certain situations, a lot of different interesting things going on that I think bode well. But you're right. At the end of the day, you're going to need to be able to score enough to win and be able to win games to ultimately get that consistent buy-in. Mick, your thoughts?
2 things. I'd like to stand on the shoulders of what Brick just said to say that last season when Joe Sacco calmed down the chaos and simplified the game, they got some structure, and the problem is he just alluded they didn't have the results to sustain the buy-in. When the calendar turned to 2025, they went to New York and were playing really well. And the Rangers were on a terrible losing streak. And the Bruins went there and fell on their faces and played a horrible hockey game. I was at the game. And I was stunned and disappointed at how bad they were. And the Bruins went into a tailspin and the Rangers went on a winning streak. And I'm like, what the hell just happened here? How is this possible, what we're looking at here, when the Bruins had such a good opportunity to? And I think one of the things is that I think that right at that point, the Bruins really needed another winger who could pop in a few goals. They needed something to give them results that they could not get. They went up against the wall, and I think that they were spiritually kind of maxed. And I think that that's when they started trying to do too much as a team, and they fell to pieces. They sprung leaks, and then we had the McAvoy injury in the Four Nations, and everything went south. And but I felt like for a short window there, they had the buy-in. I'm looking at this camp and I say yes to everything you guys said, except there's an elephant in the kitchen, and its name is Casey Middlestat. Um, he is a guy that you would hope that what Don Sweeney has done best as a general manager in identifying needles in the haystack of guys who had not really actualized his NHL potential, whether it's Morgan Geekie, Pavel Zacha, he was a 6th overall in that 15 draft. Rob Hampus Lindholm was one of these guys. And they get these guys, they identify them, they bring them in, and they elevate them, and they put them in positions to be better players, and they become better players. Casey Middlestat, they obviously had to take the contract and the Charlie Coyle deal to get the draft pick, but they got the guy. Now, can they whisper to him and get inside him and get the buy-in? I don't know. Casey Middlestat looks to me like a guy who's skating with a groin pull when he's going in a straight line. His crossovers don't look bad, but I just always feel like there's not enough there. There's like it looks like a guy who's beaten before he starts, and the way he plays, as much skill as he has, I have no confidence whatsoever right now that he's going to actualize for this team the way those other guys did, that they're going to get to him, that he's going to be able to be part of this. So for me, that's a lingering problem for me that's hard to ignore because he's not a third line winger. He's a second line center. That's a big difference.
Yeah, and I think let's talk more about Casey Middlestat. I want to get Brick's thoughts as well, but let me stop really quick and give some love to our sponsors. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Join over 10 million users and get started today instead of battling thousands of other players that could be pros or sharks. You simply pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you watch the winnings roll right in. It is fun. It is super simple. Prize Picks also offers injury reboots. If any of your players leave the game in the first half and don't return, Prize Picks will not count it as a loss. You can now win up to 2,000 times your money on Prize Picks. Prize Picks also offers Venmo and MasterCard and Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. Our picks for this week are Morgan Geekie, more than 0.5 points, Tom Wilson, more than 3 hits, and Noah Hannafin, more than 21 and a half minutes of ice time. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Let's also thank our friends at Game Time. Anytime you need any kind of tickets, concerts, comedy, theater, Bruins tickets for sure, Patriots tickets, big win for them last week. Go to Game Time. With football season here and hockey and baseball getting going, basketball getting going as well, now is the time to dig into the Game Time ticket app. The app is super easy to use and has tons of great features for sports, comedy, concerts, theater, and all kinds of other tickets. My favorite is that the fees are included. You know your total up front and no surprise fees at checkout. They have zone deals, so you save even more when you choose a section like Game Time Choose the Seats. Favorites, you snag new ticket deals before anyone finds out by following your favorite team in the Game Time app to receive alerts. They have the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Today's super deal is Thursday, October 9th, Bruins opening night and NESN opening night against the Chicago Blackhawks, Loge floor, 19 row 5 for only $164. That's a pretty good deal for opening night. You're not going to get that deal once the Bruins get going and they win some games. So jump all over that right now for Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, create an account, redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download the Game Time app today. For those of you listening to this episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast, we ask you to subscribe to the podcast, like and leave a review. And for those watching the show on CLNS and enjoying all this hockey talk, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the Bruins Ringside YouTube channel, where you can find our show and a lot of other great Bruins content with fellow Bruins talkers like Conor Ryan and Evan Marinofski. There's also the CLNS Media Network and Celtics All Access on CLNS, NBA History Channel, Patriots Press Pass, and the Bruins Ringside YouTube channel, of course. Also, please make sure to turn on your notifications so you know the instant a new Pucks with Haggs podcast video drops on the interwebs. All right, Brick. I'm going to tell you right now, I think Mick encapsulated his feelings very well on Casey Middlestat. I don't know what to expect from Casey Middlestat. Like, I don't. I see flashes of offense. I see definite playmaking at times. I think he could be effective on the power play. I think you put him with skill players, he's going to make some plays. But there's so many other things that he does not bring to the table for me consistently, that him being in a top 6 role, it's hard to justify at times. And if you look at his NHL career, like, the production hasn't been there over the consistency of a whole season. And he's been moved a couple of times in a couple of year span, which is always a little bit of a white flag with a player that was drafted as high as him too, and seems to have the skating and skills that he has and flashes on occasion. Just your thoughts on Casey Middlestat admitting fully that we didn't see the best of him, I'm sure, at the end of last season after he arrived in trade.
Yeah, a lot of variables here when I consider Casey Middlestat and can he be a Boston Bruin and be an impactful player and help him win hockey games. And I'm not sure where to begin. I guess I'll say I wasn't sure if he was even going to be part of this roster. You heard Cam during his presser say, we tried to add offense in the offseason and just deals didn't materialize. And I thought maybe he might be one of those guys involved in a deal that might address that situation. So we'll start with that concept. He needs to play with bona fide NHL wingers that have offensive capabilities if he's going to be that impactful player. And what do the Bruins have in terms of those players for him to play with? And the only logical choices are the two guys he's lined up with, in Pavel Zacha and Victor Arvidsson. Yep. Now, can he be a guy that distributes the puck and gets those guys into scoring areas and high danger chances? I love Zacha as a player. I really do. I love a lot of what he does. But I just wish he could finish more. He gets great opportunities, and if he had a better finishing touch, he becomes a more valuable player and an asset, even if you start thinking about moving players in the future. I don't know what we're going to get from Victor Arvidsson. Can he be a top 6 player at this point in his career? I love the way he plays in terms of his aggressiveness, getting to the net, playing between the dots, even at his size. His compete is really high. But again, you're going to need scoring from that second line if this team's going to win the games they're supposed to win or need to win. But Middlestat, if you just take him as an individual entity, his skating isn't impressive. He's not going to wow you. He's not going to draw 2 or 3 people to him. Teams feel like they can check him one-on-one and not have to worry about breaking down because he's going to beat people one-on-one. So he needs to really make plays in small areas. He has to be effective from the tops of the circles down. He's not going to score from distance. He's somewhat limited in the way he can be effective. But if he can play that game with veteran NHL guys that know how to protect the puck, know how to play low-risk hockey, yet creative at the same time, then I think he can be effective. And I think he can help your second power play if he's feeling good about his game and he feels like there's belief in him as a player. And the other variable that I think I would bring up is, where is he in his career? Haggs, you mentioned he's been in 2 different places. There's a white flag there. I don't know what that Buffalo experience was when he was in formative years of being an NHL player. I'm sure it wasn't a positive. Yep. And then the pressures to go into Colorado as a 2C, probably didn't handle that very well based on where he was coming from. And these aren't excuses. I'm trying to figure the kid out. But what is he, 26, going to be 27? He should be in that sweet spot of his career where he's figured things out. He's matured. He understands the league. He understands his capabilities. He understands his shortcomings. How best can I be an effective Boston Bruin? And you hope that growth and that maturity carries him to be the player he needs to be if he's going to be in the top 6 for the Bruins.
Yeah, I think those are all great points. And I am so on board with you talking about young players and the organizations they develop with and how they learn how to be NHL players, and some being much better environments than others as far as turning them into like their ultimate potential of who they can be and reaching that potential. Whereas some places like Buffalo, you wonder if that, it's just not a good environment for talented players to fully develop into what they're going to be. And I don't think it's a coincidence either that you see some players leave Buffalo and go somewhere else and they're playing like they got out of jail. There's definitely that element when players leave the Sabres for sure. Let me ask you this, Brick. Cam mentioned he mentioned a couple times piss and vinegar at the press conference the other day, and I knew what he was talking about. I loved that he said it. I think it's a distinct and good way to describe exactly what they're looking for with some of the players that they brought in, and an element they feel like they didn't have at times last year when things would start to go wrong on the road and it would all of a sudden they would fold and lose by 7 or 8 goals, which you just can't have in the NHL. And some of that fight needed to be there, not only to not let that happen, but to also initiate and be the aggressor and not be the one always reacting to what the other team was doing. Um, how much can you explain to people out there that are listening why piss and vinegar matters in the NHL if you want a good team, if you want a good team in the playoffs, if you want a team that is going to win, and why it can't be all about, for our younger fans out there, about bar graphs and pie charts and fancy stats and Corsi, and which has its place. There's no question about it. You want puck possession players. You want players that generate offense and shots on net. You know that is always important to have. And I think some of those stats help you recognize players that you might not see with your eye or might not notice as much that do that and do that really well. But why things like piss and vinegar matter for an NHL team, and why you need players like Mikey Isamont, Tanner Jeannot, guys like that that are going to bring some of that element.
Yeah, to me, it's very simple, Haggs, when I hear that phrase. And that just means to me that when you line up shoulder to shoulder to face off with an opponent, he just knows that this is going to be brutal. This is going to be a brutal shift, you know, and I won't say it leads to players quitting, but it minimizes their effectiveness because they know what's coming, you know. They know what's coming. This is going to be incredibly hard to win a puck. It's going to be incredibly hard to outmuscle my opponent. It's going to be really hard to win that one-on-one along the wall. It's going to be really hard to get to the front of the net. And when you have that doubt in a player's or an opponent's mind, whether it's doubt or it's not so much fear, but, you know, this is going to be really hard. It's going to be really hard.
You get discouraged a little.
It gives you an advantage. It gives you an advantage. And I remember learning that lesson. I was in the old, you know, Patrick division, and, you know, I would line up against the likes of Paul Holmgren and, you know, Eric Nystrom. And, you know, I mean, that was scary stuff for me. Like, this is going to be a hard shift, you know, and it happened night in and night out because the Flyers and the Islanders those days, that's the way they played. And I get what Cam's talking about. And it's not about dropping the gloves, but when you already mentioned the guys that can do that, and that's great. And the Bruins fans will appreciate it. And when done at the right time and done effectively, that also helps you. The only thing that comes hand in glove with that is you better have a good penalty killing group, because that way you're not afraid to take those aggressive kind of penalties. Not the stick, you know, not the hooks and the slashes, you know, like the real aggressive, hard hitting, you know, driving to the net, protecting the front of the net kind of penalties, the cross checks in front of the net, make it really discouraging for players to have an easy night and to generate easy scoring chances. To me, that's what piss and vinegar is all about.
Yeah, I think that's well encapsulated, well described, Rick. I absolutely agree. And I think you have to have that in the NHL. This is a competitive contact sport where there's an intimidation level and there's a level of toughness that you have to have if you're going to have success. And you need some of those guys make everybody else in your lineup more courageous too, and allow them to play with a little more of that toughness and courage when they might not if those guys aren't there. Mick, your thoughts on the piss and vinegar comments from Camp?
Oh, for some reason, my brain went all the way back to Jeff Zaire. He was a Bruins, a low, obscure draft pick who had a bit of an edge to his game and some size, and but he had a bad knee, very complicated knee, and he took a run at one of the Capitals one night, and I guess Craig Berube said to him, "Kid, you do that one more time, I'm going to send you back to the minors in a body bag." He was rattled after the game. I mean, there's an intimidation factor in hockey. It's not a video game. It's not an algebraic equation. It's not something that you make happen via computer. It's something at the end of the day that Brick knows from having played that this is a tough sport. I remember when the late great Mike Loftus and I had the opportunity to play on the tarmac at Revere Beach right after the Bruins drafted Joe Thornton, and they were starting to do the sand sculptures, and they were having this Bruins event. And some of the, Jason Allison played street hockey in this game. They built a little street hockey rink. Joe Thornton, in 80 sweltering degrees, put on the goalie equipment, was our goalie. He was like 18 years old. And Willie O'Ree was in the game. And Peter Laviolette was coaching Providence. He was at the very end of his playing career. And I remember Mike telling me, "Yeah, Lavy got me right in the leg with a stick. I positioned myself to back check and try to box him out. All of a sudden, I felt like a hot knife went right through my leg, and I looked. It was him with his stick. And I'm thinking, like, on. It's just the freaking media. We're crusty old sports writers, you know. But this is the competitive nature of the professional athlete. Full disclosure, Joe knows this. Peter Laviolette married my cousin's daughter. So when the Hassenfusses still lived in Norfolk, my cousin Ann would always have a July 4th cookout, and so Peter and his family would always come, and he and and Bilbo and son would have, like, just playing badminton. It looked like they wanted to kill each other. It just never shuts off for these guys. It's rough. It's intimidating. Just being on the same competitive floor in any case with any of these people who have achieved something to this level in their life, it can get crazy. And if you're not ready for it, I think a lot of people are nerdy hockey fans these days who are obsessed with these stats don't really understand in the grassroots how intimidating this sport can be. Television doesn't show you everything.
Well, as much as the game has evolved, and we all love the speed and the skill and how much talent has entered into this National Hockey League compared to where it was even during the scoring generation when I was playing, some things never change. And that aspect of the game has not changed and will never change. It'll always be an aspect of it and a part of it. And I'm telling you, my mind's racing. You start telling stories like that, Mick. I was at Jay Miller's daughter's wedding this summer. And you know, one of the guests was Ben Wilson. Do you remember Gentle Ben?
Oh, my God.
And when I was with the Flyers,
BEHN.
we came out for practice, you know, and I'm a college guy, and I'm skating around with Mark Taylor, another college guy, went to North Dakota. And Mark went over, lifted Ben's stick, and took his puck. Right?
Oh, boy.
Ben waited for him to make a lap. He came over, he two-handed him right across the neck and said, "Don't ever do that again." And we were teammates.
Yeah.
And I think I called Bobby Nystrom, Eric Nystrom by mistake, but I was my mind's racing.
Bobby Nystrom was super tough.
Oh, I mean, that generation, those guys, I mean, you learn so much from them, but they played such a hard game and a heavy game and a scary game. Really, it was scary. It was such a learning process that, you know, that toughness comes in many different ways, but the most effective toughness aspect you can have is when you have the puck, don't let anybody take it from it, and when you don't, go get it.
Yep. Get it right
it's
back.
funny, in the new era of the NHL that began in 2005, the salary cap NHL with the two-line pass and the synthetic sticks, and it's suddenly air hockey. It's a video arcade game. Bung, 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 the puck, the way it shoots around the ice, and people haven't tried. So many players move out, so many players move in. It's chaotic. It's hard to play defense, hard to have structure. And then Claude Julien comes along and says, we need to be strong on our skates, strong on our sticks. And he really was as responsible as anyone, maybe Darryl Sutter out west, for bringing back reminding everybody how you win hockey games. And what still is true in hockey is always going to be true in hockey. You could be playing a pickup media game. I remember Brian Burke was playing a pickup media game, and I was playing in it, the NHL All-Star game, and I think it was at Madison Square Garden, and we're going back to 1994 here, and he's like, sticks his leg out in front. It's like, wait a second, this is just a gentleman's kind of a fun game we're playing here, and yet he's kind of like, but it's like a challenging thing. It's kind of like, okay, you're making it so the only thing I can do to get the puck from you right now is to do something physical. So am I going to wind up fighting Brian Burke? I don't think so. So there's just, there's certain lines that people draw, and then other people draw at different places. And, hockey's intimidating at its very core. It's intimidating.
Yeah. And it's not apples to apples, but one final thought on that topic. I don't know who gets credit for saying it. I usually reference Red Auerbach that, if you're going to keep score, you might as well win.
That's a great point.
That's it. It's a game wins.
So play to win. Play to win.
That's right. Hey, Brick, this is has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but I also wanted to give you a shout out because I heard you on the broadcast the other night with Judd, and you were talking about like all your siblings' cars. And my dad, my dad drove a 1980 green Ford Escort, and there was a 32 Louisville Slugger in the back seat that propped up the driver's seat in that car for like the entirety of us having that car. So when you mentioned that about the bat holding up the seat, I was like, I identify. And maybe it's because I'm from Stoneham and you're from Melrose, and that's just what we did in those neighborhoods back in the day. But I had the same exact upbringing with my dad's car, and I was cracking up when you said that on the broadcast.
Yeah. Well, those are the kinds of conversations you can get away with during training camp.
Yes, 100%. All right,
hockey podcast probably won't give you the exposure you need to get this message out, but I love the fact that we get this opportunity to have Brick here because he's one of the guys that I think of when I think of guys like Tom Glavine or Richie Hebner or any of the people that played multiple sports growing up in New England and really kind of tears up this emerging three-sport media look down their nose at the sport of hockey like they're children of a lesser god and they don't know how to play anything else. They're just these little elves that came down, spilled out from Canada and landed here in our ponds, and they're hockey players, but they're not really, it's not a real sport and they're not real athletes. I've actually heard accomplished journalists say things like this, and they're idiots because they don't understand that we all grew up playing everything. Bobby Orr played baseball growing up. Yvonne Conway loves baseball. Brick, tell us just take a second here to talk about your sports experience growing up. Hockey became the thing, but you were really good at other stuff.
Mick, this is important too because we talk a lot of youth hockey stuff. My son plays, my daughter plays, I coach. We talk youth hockey. We have other people on that will talk about youth hockey stuff as well. This is an absolutely great question, Mick. And Brick, please tell everybody out there why it's important, not if you believe that it is, and I think you do, why it's important not to specialize in playing hockey at a young age and only playing hockey, and why playing baseball, playing soccer, playing lacrosse, playing golf, all these other sports translate in, if you eventually want your kid to be a great hockey player, how they translate into having skills and being a good hockey player.
Yeah, I'm fortunate enough to be invited to a number of the Bruins summer camps to address the kids. I don't go on the ice with them, but I talk to them for maybe half an hour, do a little Q&A, and that is always part of my message, that even though you're at a hockey camp, you're in a hockey rink and it's the middle of the summer, don't just be a hockey player, be an athlete, play everything, play every sport that you enjoy playing, you should play it. Yep. And don't just put all your eggs in one basket and say, all right, I'm going to be an NHL player and I'm going to play hockey, 24/7 all year round. I just think you learn to use so much more of your body when you play other sports, your hand-eye coordination, your conditioning, how you think a sport. You understand how to attack defenses. You understand how to defend yourself. You have to process all the moving parts, and you apply that to each individual sport you play, and they're all different. And you don't get bored with one game. Some people, they're burned out. I don't like that phrase, but you're burned out. You're burned out by the time you're 18 because all you did was play hockey or all you did play is baseball. So, but I came from a large family. There was 7 of us, 5 boys. So we had our own team in the making right there. And we come from a very athletic family. I remember when we moved from Malden to Melrose when I was going into 2nd grade, we had to move to a house that was adjacent to a ballpark because that's how we lived our lives.
Yep.
And everybody did. And then I was a product of, the 70s Boston Bruins. That's how hockey became prominent in my life. Those guys were my heroes. They were my idols. They were swashbuckling, incredibly talented, tough, best players in the world, Stanley Cup champions. And, everybody wanted to play hockey. And then if you couldn't skate or you couldn't afford it, everybody could play street hockey. There was just so much hockey to be played. So it became a real, part of my fabric. But I also loved baseball. My grandfather played in the major leagues. He had a cup of coffee, played for Connie Mack, Philadelphia A's. So the baseball was always there. But I played everything because I lived on a park and I was encouraged to play everything. And even as I got into my teens, my parents would argue. My mother's like, he needs to get a job. And my father would say, just let him play. But yeah, that's my message. Play everything. I think it makes you a better athlete. If you play baseball, if you play lacrosse, you play soccer, you'll be a better hockey player for it.
No question. And the other part of that, Brick, too, is like you're starting to see players that are specializing in hockey at young ages. You see young kids that are having hip issues like way before they should, because they're just on the ice too much, and it's just the repetitiveness of being skating all the time, two times a day for most of the year, and like not good for kids when they're developing physiologically and they're growing up and maturing. It's a warning sign that it's too much, and you need to be playing like when we were growing up. It was always you played what was in season, and you moved around to all the different sports. You'd play football in the fall, you'd play hockey in the winter, you'd play baseball in the spring. You do, a little more baseball or something else in the summertime. Maybe you go to the beach a lot. Like that's the way it
Morgan
should be.
Geeky wanted to be a baseball player.
Yeah, well, he's a really good baseball player, and I think his brother is too. They're definitely a baseball family, no question about it. All right, let's get to one question before we go. This is from PFitz777 on Twitter. I'm not so confident about Swayman bouncing back. He's got a lot to prove. Brick, your thoughts, because I think he factors, and both goalies, let's face it, factor hugely into the fortunes of this team this year. You absolutely have to have a bounce back season from Jeremy Swayman after that full training camp. Motivated, I think, to show that last year was the outlier and that's not who he is, and he was really impacted. And like, frankly, I think a lot of the Bruins season was submarined by the fact he missed camp and just couldn't be what he was going to be, and that's where things started to go sideways a little bit. How confident are you, from what you've seen in camp and just your gut instincts, that Swayman is going to bounce back in a big way and be more what he was a couple of years ago, and that he and Korpisalo are going to be the tandem that the Bruins are going to need behind a pretty strong defense, what should be a strong defense?
Yeah, I like the person. I like the player. I liked what he did in camp. I'm a little bit more optimistic that he will have a bounce back year, but I'm also a realist. And what he needs not only is the believability himself, which I don't think he has any shortness of, despite what happened last year, but he needs better. He needs better play in front of him, and he has to know where the shots are coming from. He has to know that he has the structure that's taken away, the middle of the ice as best they can. They need, as a group, a better mental toughness. In other words, think about the goals that they gave up late in periods, start of games, 6-on-5s, just like pathetically bad situational hockey. And the goalies were part of it, but they weren't the only part of it. So I just think it starts with all that believability. I think he has it in himself. I think there's enough reasons to explain away last year that this year could be more of what we experienced, especially in his playoff performance when he finally got the net. You think back to that comment he made when they said, you got the net. What do you think? He goes, yeah, finally. I mean, we had such a great goaltending tandem there for a while, and he was a beneficiary of that, and they worked well together and they pushed each other. And I'm hoping that's the case with Korpisalo because of the compressed schedule, because they're going to need both of them for sure. But I do have believability that he has believability in himself, and based on the small sample size I saw in camp, and usually I don't give the World Championships a lot of credence.
Yep.
But that's helpful, maybe I'm being a little too, trying to explain away why I think it's going to be a better year. But I'm optimistic that it will be.
I mean, that was the first time they'd won the World Championships in how long? Team USA,
that's
something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That is. I think there is significance to that, and then being able to accomplish that, and him looking so good as they were doing it. Yes, I know the best players are still playing in the playoffs, and it's kind of viewed through that prism sometime, the World Championships, but that's still extremely high level hockey, and I was impressed by what he did and his ability to build on that over the summer.
Haggs, this game humbles you. It humbles everybody.
Yep.
And he got humbled last year.
Yep.
With the contract holder, the expectations that I'm this, I'm that. The PR tour that he was making. It's just all of that stuff. And then he got humbled. And you hope that humbling experience really teaches him not only a career lesson, but a life lesson. And that's why I'm optimistic that I have belief in this kid.
100%. I agree totally with that. Mick, your thoughts just on Swayman going into this year and your believability that he's going to bounce back.
Goalies are weird. They don't all have the same personality, but almost all the time their personalities are a certain something that's a little different from your everyday person. And I think that Swayman has got a steely, defiant confidence about himself that's not broken by what happened last year. So while, yes, humbled, he was humbled and we saw it, but he definitely is just steadfast in his self-belief. I love the fact that he is staying this guy. It's a little Patrick Waugh to me. It's kind of like I'm still believe 100% that I'm going to do this. And I love that about him because I think it enables him to break through to great heights in his play. The, the, the most surprising question I kept getting all summer was, are they going to trade Corpusalo? And I'm thinking every time, why? Why
Yep.
would you trade a
Yep.
good, competent veteran backup whom they need to push this guy and keep him humble and keep him in knowing that he can't get complacent, and also a guy who's performed very well under the circumstances in which he had gotten the net at times and was unhappy that he didn't get it more. Like, this is some problem we need to resolve. Let's get DiPietro in here. I just thought that was off the charts. I could not wrap my head around it, and it was relentless. Right up until the time that DiPietro cleared waivers, I didn't hear the end of this. And where does Corpusalo wind up? Oh, it's a disaster that they're spending this much to the cap on goaltending. No, it's not. It's just more than most teams. That's all it is. And they got as good a goaltending situation as anybody coming into this season. And I think they got the defense personnel if they manage Lowry correctly. I'm a little concerned about Marco's balanced D pairings and asking Lowry to start the season with McAvoy. I'm not sure how that's going to go because I haven't seen enough from Lowry to show me that he can go back to the guy that I thought was growing his defensive game until last year when they hit the tank. And they just basically gave them like it was like Ramondre Stevenson, and if you fumble, we're going to keep giving you the ball. And or the fact that he doesn't contain well in his own D zone. Sean Hutchin was telling me that he thought that Lowry should become a forward, and I thought that was like probably not realistic, but why? Tell me why. You're a hockey coach, and he said, look at his skates. Look at the way he's positioned before the Bruins get the puck back. He's already thinking offense. Yeah, there's been some defensemen along the game's history that play that way and have had the career offense legacy to get away with it. But I'm not sure how many of those players ever won. I feel like the offense has to stand on the shoulders of the defense to be successful for a winning team. And I'm not convinced right now that Lowry has rebounded from that guy that we saw last year, who led them in scoring from the blue line, but also led the league in minus. And I'm not sold. I love the fact that they got Harris there to push him. And I expect to see both guys at some point, or Marco maybe to revert and decide what he's going to do there. I'm a little concerned about that whole part of it, but I like the personnel, and I believe that Swayman should be able to play off of that. Will it be Jaguar in 03 or Brodeur all those times playing off his defense and the angles and everything? No, but it'll be good. This team should be a bubble team. And like Brick says, to me, the NHL is just the opposite of the American economy. The middle class is huge. There's a few great teams. There's a few horrible teams that aren't going to be anywhere near it. And then there's a bunch of teams that need certain things to go right that could go wrong in order for them to be the teams that make up that bottom half of the playoffs in their conference. And the Bruins are in that class, as far as I'm concerned, because of their goaltending and their back end. And I'm glad Corpusalo's staying.
I feel pretty safe, Mick, and I've said this a lot, that I think the Bruins are going to be playing meaningful games in March and April. That's my feeling on them, is that I think it's going to be within a few points here or there, whether they get into the playoffs. I think they're probably going to be fighting for a wild card, but I do think they're going to be playing meaningful games down the stretch, and they're going to be in the mix. And just think about where they were last year before McAvoy finally went down at Four Nations, and they lost both of their top defensemen, and their goalie wasn't playing well. They were still in the mix for the wild card at that point as well. And only once McAvoy went down did I think they really decided, that's it. We're going to steer the ship into the iceberg. We're going to trade away the veteran players, and we're going to, retool for the following year. I think they're going to be in shouting distance. I think they're going to be close. I think it's going to be an interesting season. Jeremy Swayman, to your point, Brick, about talking about it being a humbling experience last year to a degree, like the first things he said to us when we talked to him this year was that he's a totally different human being, right? And that he learned from last year, the ups and the downs and all the life experience and as a person and as a player. And I'm going to take him at his word, because I think he did. How can you not learn something from that when you're a young man put in that situation? and things go sideways for you. I think you do learn from it because I think he's a smart kid and I think he'll understand that. So that'll all be interesting to watch, though. The low ride thing is definitely interesting as well. Brick and Mick, thank you very much for joining us. Let's thank our sponsors. Welcome to you've been listening to the Pucks with Haggs podcast, a proud member of the CLNS Media Network. Make sure to hit subscribe to the Bruins Ringside YouTube channel and turn on notifications for when a new video drops on the channel. This episode was brought to you by Prize Picks. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this season on Prize Picks, where it's good to be right. The show is also brought to you by Game Time, the best ticket app to take the guesswork out of buying any kind of tickets. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download the Game Time app today. Brick and Mick, thank you very much for joining us, guys.
Thanks, Haggs. Good to see you guys.
All right, thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you at the rink.